Morena koutou. Hey, welcome to our story time for today. I hope you guys all had a great weekend. It's awesome to see so many of you here and lots of people saying hi on the chat. That's absolutely fantastic. All right, our stories for today. We have got Chicken Big, and we're going to continue on with James and the Giant Peach. Alrighty, let's get stuck into it. We're going to start with Chicken Big. On a teeny little farm, in an itty-bitty coop, a very small hen laid a big, humongous egg. Buck! The egg began to shake. The egg began to quake. Out popped a big, humongous chick. What is it? Crowed the little rooster. It's big, clucked the small chicken. It's enormous, clucked the smaller chicken. It's an elephant, peeped the smallest chicken. She was not the sharpest beak in the flock. He's too big to stay in a itty-bitty coop, crowed the little rooster. Much, much too big, clucked the small chicken. He'll break the floor, clucked the smaller chicken. Indoor elephants are dangerous, squawked the smallest chicken. I don't feel like an elephant, thought the big chick. And he's thinking, I wish I were a chicken. And the sign says, no elephants allowed. The next day, an acorn fell and conked the smallest chicken on the head. The sky is falling, she peeped. Run for your lives. Bark, 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 bark. So the chickens ran for their lives. Don't worry, said the big humongous chick. It's only an acorn. They're actually quite tasty. I don't think elephants eat acorns, said the little rooster. I heard they only eat popcorn, clucked the small chicken. Maybe he's not an elephant, clucked the smaller chicken. The smallest chicken looked closely at the big humongous chick. Ah, my mistake, she peeped. He must be a squirrel. A squirrel, thought the big humongous chick. Later on, the smallest chicken was picking for worms when a raindrop splattered on top of her head. Sprat! The sky is leaking, she peeped. We're all drowned, run for your lives. And the chickens ran for their lives again. Relax, said the big humongous chick. It's only rain. Come stand under my wings and you'll stay dry. I've never seen a squirrel do that, crowed the little rooster. Not very squirrelish at all, clucked the small chicken. Squirrels don't keep you dry in the rain, clucked the smaller chicken. I see what you're saying, peeped the smallest chicken. Apparently, he's an umbrella. These are not bright chickens, thought the big chick. After a while, a chilly wind began to blow. Someone has put the world in a refrigerator, peeped the smallest chicken. We're all going to freeze. Run for your lives. But they didn't get far. Don't panic, said the big humongous chick. It's only the north wind. Stand behind me and I'll protect you. The chickens all felt much better. An umbrella would have turned inside out in the wind, croaked the little rooster. He's not inside out as far as I can tell, clucked the small chicken. I'm all warm and comfy now, clucked the smaller chicken. Only one thing makes me feel this way, peeped the smallest chicken. Plainly, this fellow is a jumper. I love the look at his face. This is getting ridiculous, thought the big, humongous chick. At nap time, the little chickens returned to the coop and found all their eggs were gone. We've been robbed, crowed the little rooster. By an egg burglar, clucked the small chicken. Woe is me, clucked the smaller chicken. Woe is me too, peeped the smallest chicken. The chickens all began to boo-hoo. Boo-hoo-hoo-hoo-hoo. the big, humongous chick saw a sneaky red fox carrying the eggs into his den a mile away. "Oh, no, you don't!" With 3 giant hop, hop, hops, the big, humongous chick caught up to the fox just as he was about to make himself a scrambled egg supper. "Yikes!" said the fox. "A hippopotamus!" "I don't think so," said the big, humongous chick, "but you are a naughty thief." The frightened fox ran away with his tail between his legs, having lost all interest in poultry. In no time, the big chick was stomping back to the coop with the missing eggs. "Our babies!" cried the happy little chickens. "Our hero!" they all clucked. "Yay!" "I knew it all along," crowed the little rooster. "He's no elephant." "He's definitely not a squirrel," clucked the small chicken. "He's surely no umbrella," clucked the smaller chicken. "He couldn't be a jumper," peeped the smallest chicken. "Only one thing can be so smart, so kind, so warm, and so brave. Clearly, he's a cow." "No!" shouted the others. "He's a chicken." The big humongous chicken was thrilled to find out he was a chicken after all. "Oh, thank goodness," he said. "Now I can move back into the coop." "Actually, it's a rather small coop," crowed the little rooster. "It's itty-bitty," clucked the small chicken. "Teensy-weensy," clucked the smaller chicken. "But we'll make room," peeped the smallest chicken. I think they might need a new chicken coop. All right, we were up to chapter 9. We'd found out that the peach had magically grown bigger and bigger, and Aunt Sponge and Aunt Spiker had been charging people to come and see it, and then they'd kicked him out of the house to clean up. And poor James he's not feeling too great at the moment, but let's see what happens. Hungry and trembling, James stood alone out in the open, wondering what to do. The night was all around him now, and high overhead a wild white moon was riding in the sky. There was not a sound, not a movement anywhere. Most people, and especially small children, are often quite scared of being out of doors alone in the moonlight. Everything is so deadly quiet, and the shadows are so long and black, and they keep turning into strange shapes that seem to move as you look at them, and the slightest little snap of a twig makes you jump. Shows you how big that peach is. It's pretty enormous. James felt exactly like that now. He stared straight ahead with large, frightened eyes, hardly daring to breathe. Not far away in the middle of the garden, he could see the giant peach towering over everything else. Surely it was even bigger tonight than ever before, and what a dazzling moonlight and sight it was. The moon was shining and glinting on its great curving sides, turning them to crystal and silver. It looked like a tremendous silver ball lying there in the grass, silent, mysterious, and wonderful. And then all at once, little shivers of excitement started running over the skin of James's back. Something else, he told himself. Something stranger even this time is about to happen to me again soon. He was sure of it. He could feel it coming. He looked around him, wondering what on earth was going to be. The garden lay soft and silver in the moonlight. The grass was wet with dew, and a million dewdrops were sparkling and twinkling like diamonds around his feet. And now, suddenly, the whole garden seemed to be alive with magic. Almost without knowing what he was doing, as though drawn by some powerful magnet, James Henry Trotter started walking slowly towards the giant peach. He climbed over the fence that surrounded it and stood directly beneath it, staring up at its great bulging sides. He put out a hand and gently touched it with the tip of one finger. It felt soft and warm and slightly furry, like the skin of a baby mouse. He moved a step closer and rubbed his cheek lightly against the soft skin. And then suddenly, while he was doing this, he happened to notice that right beside him and below him, close to the ground, there was a hole in the side of the peach. Chapter 10. I wonder what that hole is. It was quite a large hole, the sort of thing an animal about the size of a fox might have made. James knelt down in front of it and poked his head and shoulders inside. He crawled in. He kept on crawling. This wasn't a hole, he thought excitedly. It's a tunnel. The tunnel was damp and murky, and all around him there was the curious bittersweet smell of fresh peach. The floor was soggy under his knees, the walls were wet and sticky, and peach juice was dripping from the ceiling. James opened his mouth and caught some of it on his tongue, and it tasted delicious. He was crawling uphill now as though the tunnel were leading straight towards the very center of the gigantic fruit. Every few seconds he paused and took a bite out of the wall. The peach flesh was sweet and juicy and marvelously refreshing. He crawled on for several more yards, and then suddenly, bang! The top of his head bumped into something extremely hard, blocking his way. He glanced up. In front of him there was a solid wall that seemed at first as though it were made of wood. He touched it with his fingers. It certainly felt like wood, except that it was very jagged and full of deep grooves. Good heavens, he said. I know what this is. We've come to the stone in the middle of the peach. Then he noticed there was a small door cut into the face of the peach stone. He gave a push. It swung open. He crawled through it, and before he had time to glance up and see where he was, he heard a voice saying, "Look who's here!" And another one said, "We've been waiting for you." James stopped and stared at the speakers, his face white with horror. He started to stand up, but his knees were shaking so much he had to sit down again on the floor. He glanced behind him, thinking he could bolt back into the tunnel the way he'd come, but the doorway had disappeared. There was now only a solid brown wall behind him. Chapter 11. Shall we keep going? Yeah, why not? We'll do one more chapter. James... there's James right there, and he's by the door crawling through the tunnel. And I'm sure the fact that he hadn't had anything to eat, it would have been absolutely delicious as he ate his way up the tunnel. James' very large, frightened eyes traveled slowly round the room. The creatures, some sitting on chairs, others reclining on a sofa, were all watching him intently. Creatures. Or were they insects? An insect is usually something rather small, is it not? A grasshopper, for example, is an insect. So what would you call it if you saw a grasshopper as large as a dog? As large as a large dog. You would hardly call that an insect, could you? There was an old green grasshopper as large as a large dog sitting directly across the room from James. And next to the old green grasshopper, there was enormous spider. And next to the spider, there was a giant ladybird with 9 black spots on his scarlet shell. Each of these 3 was squatting upon a magnificent chair. On a sofa nearby, reclining comfortably in curled-up positions, there was a centipede and an earthworm. On the floor, over in the far corner, there was something thick and white that looked as though it might be a silkworm, but it kept sleeping soundly and nobody was paying attention to it. Every one of these creatures was at least as big as James himself, and in the strange greenish light that shone down from somewhere in the ceiling, they were absolutely terrifying to behold. "I'm hungry," the spider announced suddenly, staring hard at James. "I'm famished," the old green grasshopper said. "So am I," the ladybird cried. The centipede sat up a little straighter on the sofa. "Everyone's famished," he said. "We need food." 4 pairs of round, glassy eyes were all fixed upon James. The centipede made a wriggling movement with his body, as though he were about to glide off the sofa, but he didn't. There was a long pause and a long silence. The spider, who happened to be a female spider, opened her mouth and ran a long black tongue delicately over her lips. "Aren't you hungry?" she asked, suddenly leaning towards and addressing herself to James. Poor James was backed up against the far wall, shivering with fright and much too terrified to answer. "What's the matter with you?" the old green grasshopper said. "You look positively ill." He looks like as though he's going to faint any second, the centipede said. Oh my goodness, the poor thing, the ladybird cried. I do believe he thinks it's him we are wanting to eat. There was a roar of laughter from all sides. Oh dear, they said. What an awful thought. You mustn't be frightened, the ladybird said kindly. We wouldn't dream of hurting you. You're one of us now. Didn't you know that? You're one of the crew. We're all in the same boat. We've been waiting for you all day long, said the old green grasshopper. We thought you were never going to turn up. I'm glad you made it. So cheer up, my boy, cheer up, the centipede said. And meanwhile, I wish you'd come over here and give me a hand with these boots. It takes me hours to get them off all by myself. Interesting. Something has happened to the creatures. We've got these giant creatures in a giant peach, and there is James, and these creatures talk. That is something magical. We are going to carry on tomorrow with chapter 12. We'll read another few chapters as well. Hey, it's been awesome to have you guys joining us for story time today. I hope you guys have a good day. I know that your teachers have set some work for you with some learning grids. Have fun with those activities. If you can, make sure you're getting outdoors doing something as well. Try and do some online activities, some offline activities, and get out there and do some physical activity as well. All right, we'll be back tomorrow at 10 a.m. for our next story time. Hey, it's been great to see you, and we'll catch up tomorrow. Ka kite anō.